see. Just gonna keep letting people in. It's cracking me up. There are a couple of you guys who have your pictures of you look so much like you would look on camera. It just looks like you're very, very still and looking at me kind of funny. Okay. Well, since there are 8 of us here already, I think we should go ahead and just get started and try and be on time for once, Wendy. Welcome. Thank you all for showing up tonight. I know this is a topic that is a big deal to me. I always struggle seasonally. And so I'm grateful that we can talk about this tonight. I'm grateful for Kenneth Jeppesen. If you haven't been to our AF Aware classes before, is a local therapist here in American Fork. He's really good at what he does. And we're so lucky to have him teaching classes for us at the library. I don't think I need a whole lot of introduction tonight. I think you guys all know what we're here for. And so I think I'm just going to turn the time over to Kenneth and let him start talking.
Hello, everyone. Good to be with you tonight. You know, if you look outside at the moment, it's kind of dark. Sunset was about 2 hours ago. And if we were in July right now, it would still be light and we would still have another 2 hours of sun. A 4-hour gap can be absolutely brutal. We get home from work and we just do not want to go out again because it's nighttime. Our brain says, like, we can't leave the house. This is nighttime. This is not good. Whereas in the summer, we might come home from work and go to the gym. Now we're like, oh, no, I can't leave the house. No, we just need to stay home and watch the Great British Bake Show. That's what we need to do for an extra 4 hours, right? The dark is all around us, and far too often, the darkness kind of gets inside of us too. And that's what makes it really hard to deal with. You know, outwardly, we fight the darkness. We put up the Christmas light. And inwardly, it's a little bit harder to fight the darkness with cheer. And when we're in that state, when darkness is kind of inside of us, everything gets harder. Have you noticed, like, it's difficult to even concentrate during this time of year when you feel this, like, will just run down and low? That's difficult. We always have this like thing hanging out in the back of our mind. Whenever we're happy, it'll be like, hey, just remember, you're kind of miserable right now, and it'll ruin otherwise happy moments. You know, we just want to stay home and eat carbohydrate. We put on weight. It's hard to get up. And then there's all the feasting with the Thanksgiving, and you know, I went to the in-laws and my family, so I had 2 Thanksgivings, and let me tell you, all of the dieting I had tried up until that point was completely ruined. That was useless. I don't know why I did all that calorie restriction. But it's hard. You know, often we want to be alone. When we're around people, we don't really connect with them. It's easier to snap at the kids. It's just basically harder to function in every way. It makes everything seem kind of like not worth doing. All the things we might have enjoyed otherwise, we're just not that interested in. And so then we try to force ourselves. Like, okay, well, I'm gonna go to the gym, and maybe we make it once or twice in the month, but we give that up pretty quickly. Our health goals go out the window with all the feasting and all the holidays. When we're around people, we try to put up a good show. You know, we put up that facade, but that exhausts us further and makes it way harder. We're wanting to show up for people, but we really can't when we're in that state. We don't have the energy and we just feel drained. Now, if this feels familiar to you, just know you're not alone. As much as 10% of the population might struggle with seasonal affective disorder. If this is something you relate to, can you give me a wave, turn on the video just for a split second, no judgment. Give me a wave if this is something that sounds familiar. Yep. Having this cycle every year starts to get really old. This is one of the cycles in life that makes everything worse. Sometimes we just feel stuck and we feel dread, whereas we would have been excited, like, hey, we get Thanksgiving and we get Christmas. This is not so bad. We just kind of dread it. I've had my own experiences with cycles and cycles of dread and cycles of dread related to the loss of light. I noticed I was probably like 25 or 26 when I realized every night when the sun went down, I started to kind of get bummed. And this had been happening for as long as I could remember. And I'd always feel a dread about the next day. And so one day I sat down and said, okay, I don't like this cycle. It happens frequently, like almost every night. Why? Where did this come from? How did this cycle start up in my life? And so I got out my journal and I started writing, and I had this memory of Mr. Fernelius, my fourth grade teacher, pop into my head. And I was like, does that have anything to do with anything? What's my subconscious fitting out here? And I realized that was the year that school started to get hard for me. School started to become a stress. And so as long as the sun was up, I was playing with my friends. But when the sun goes down, it's time to come home for dinner. And that meant it's time to get ready for bed and then get ready for the next day. And so I had this sense of dread that followed me long after fourth grade ended. Now, I wouldn't really get it maybe like Friday nights because the next day, Saturday, and that's okay. But Saturday nights, I'd get it because, next day, Sunday, and after Sunday comes back to school. And so this pattern, this cycle was continuing in my life for years and years into my mid-20s. And it just kind of like swapped over from elementary to junior high into high school into college into my jobs. And so I figured out the cycle. And getting rid of this cycle allowed me to be way happier. Until we start being conscious of these invisible cycles that are going on in our life, we're just going to keep going through them up and down. Cycles take us for a ride. Life takes us for a ride. Life says, hey, guess what? It's winter. You get to be depressed. That's no way to live. We don't want our cycles to be running us. We want to be conscious. We want to be aware of the cycles so that we can start changing them and do something different. And nobody likes that. Nobody likes feeling like they're a piece of driftwood just bobbing up and down in the ocean, being carried wherever the waves want it to go. But for me to stop that cycle in my life, these evening doldrums, I had to know what was causing it. It wasn't the sunset. It wasn't the fact that it was dark. It was what the darkness represented to me. But I chose to take responsibility for this cycle in my life. I chose to take my power back and figure it out. And so now when the cycle pops up, I deal with it quickly instead of going through the whole miserable thing and dreading the night and then staying up way too late because I'm trying to avoid the next day and being tired the next day and making it worse on myself. I've learned how to get out of that cycle and create something better. So what did I do? I figured out that the key driving factor in this cycle was a belief that the next day would be scary. And it was vague enough that that could apply to any situation in my life. And so to take my power back, I had to build myself up and be stronger than that and say, you know what, I'm capable of handling things. And I also specifically looked at my life at the time and I went, well, first grade was scary, but my life's a lot better now. I can handle this. I'm capable. And when this still pops up from time to time in the evening, because habits, I just pause and I notice the anxiety in my heart and I go, oh, this is my evening doldrum cycle. And I go, I know this is caused from fourth grade when I thought tomorrow would be scary, but guess what? I am a capable adult and I actually have a job that I really, really, really like. So tomorrow is an exciting thing to look forward to. I remind myself of these truths and it fills in the space where that darkness was. And the anxiety's gone. The doldrums are gone. And now I don't have to go into every evening feeling horrible dread. So if you want to have massive changes in your life, you have to find the cycles. You change those and everything else shifts. Kenneth, why are you so successful? How have you been able to create this great life for yourself? I learned about my cycles. I took responsibility for them and I change them. Now, like getting a degree in marriage and family therapy, that's nice, that's helpful. But really, the thing that made the change was taking responsibility for them and making a shift. Can everybody do this? Well, how have you been able to help other people with their cycles? It's really because I decided to work on myself first. What I'm teaching comes from my experience, and so I know that the process works. And that's really what I want to focus on tonight, is these cycles and what we can start doing to make our lives better. Because if you change the cycle, you can change your life. And boy, we are full of cycles. There's so many of them. And we're largely unaware. We may just kind of notice like our misery, but we rarely sit down to go, hey, wait a minute, I hate this. Like, what is causing this? How do I fix it? So we're going to be focusing on the cycles that are specifically related to seasonal affective disorder. Now, seasonal affective disorder, like I said, it impacts up to 10% of the population. But that's seasonal affective disorder. If we're just talking about the winter blues, that's a much larger percentage. And I'm not even sure I'd categorize myself as having winter blues usually, but I know that when it starts up, it is kind of rough for me psychologically. This year especially, it started getting dark, and I just started going, ugh, I hate this. I hate that it's dark for so long. Plus, it's paired with like daylight savings time, and that is just the worst in the world. So there is a spectrum here, but regardless of where you fall on the spectrum, it's basically going to be the same sort of solution. So seasonal affective disorder has to do with the season. It has to do a lot with the light level that's outside. And as they study people who live at different latitudes on Earth, people who live down at the equator don't really have as much of this issue. And the higher you go, the higher the incidence of seasonal affective disorder go. Not very surprising, right? And since this is partially related to light, they've also done studies to see what happens to visually impaired people. And guess what? The visually impaired struggle with this more because it's harder to see. So they're thinking like some of this has to do with just the light that is coming into your retinas, which would make sense. But there's also been studies that are looking at your circadian rhythms, your sleep-wake cycles. And they've found some support for the idea that the lack of light screws up our rhythm. And man, I've noticed it. My sleep time has been getting advanced to where I am tired at like 8:30. And I'm finding that I really need to be falling asleep at 9:30. My eyeballs are popping open at 5:10 in the morning. And my body's like, hey, it's time to get up. And I'm like, okay, could we shift a little bit? But the light really definitely messes that up too. So how do we treat seasonal affective disorder or SAD? Well, if there's not enough light, we get more, right? Yeah, in part. They've found that that is a very helpful thing. And there are all sorts of products out there you can get. I know somebody who spent $1,000 on a really fancy light box. I, on the other hand, went to Home Depot and made this sucker for myself. The housing is like $14, and the light bulb was only $8. Plus, it's an infrared bulb, so it can warm me up when I'm freezing. And the really exciting part about it is, when you plug it in, it's just like staring into the sun. You just close your eyes and you imagine you're on a tropical beach, and it's magical and it warms you, and it feels so nice. Lovely. So for pretty cheap solutions. And if you don't want to go that far, I mean, this year I just pulled in a lamp. You know the lamp that we all have in our house from Walmart that was $10 that has the straight one up top, and then there's the bendy one on the arm. I just pulled that in the office, and I'd be sitting here doing therapy, and in between sessions, I'd flip on the bulb, just stare at it, and it's effective because there's more light. So there have been questions about like, well, is blue light better because there's more blue light during the day? Like, is red light worse? And when it comes to seasonal affective disorder, it basically is you just need light. That's about it, really. So it doesn't matter what kind of bulb you get. It's the brightness that makes the most difference. Some have tried really bright light. That would be like having a normal 60-watt bulb maybe this far from you. That'd be around 10,000 lux if you want to measure it. A lot of the studies have looked at lower light levels, and they've looked at doing like just a little bit in the morning times, and they found that that is fairly effective. So for me, I like to tinker. I got online and found this design for a light alarm clock. It has this big old capacitor, and I put it on an outlet timer, and so this starts to charge up the capacitor, which slowly starts to give juice into the LEDs. And I have enough here that it's bright enough that I like gradually wake up as if it's the sunrise. My brother got me a clock for Christmas, but it just had like 4 levels of brightness and was like very jarring. But this is a nice gradual thing. But you can find stuff like that on the internet. You can make them for not very cheap. The importance is that you have some light, and it does help if a lot of it's in the earlier morning. So pretty cut and dried, right? We get depressed because there's not enough light. We need more. We're done. The class is over. It only took us 18 minutes. Unless it's a little bit more complex than that. They've also found that something that helps seasonal affective disorder quite a bit is exercise. So what's up with that? How is it that like there's less light, but exercise helps us feel better? Something is up here. It's not as simple as it might look. And the studies have also shown that people who get cognitive behavioral therapy with light do better than the people that just get light. And 2 years later, after treatment, the people that had cognitive behavioral therapy are still doing better. So just go, I mean, you don't have to have extra light. Going to therapy and using these cognitive behavioral skills to change your cycles makes things better. So that's kind of suspect, isn't it? What does this tell us? There are natural patterns in our life. There are natural cycles. There's momentum of events, right? A bad thing can happen, and these external events kind of build on each other, and they impact our mood. There's so many environmental things. If it's cold, we don't want to go outside. Well, we don't exercise as much, and it's pretty established science that you kind of need exercise to be happy. There's a lot of things that can come and change our life and influence it. What we eat, eating sugar, we know causes inflammation, and depression has to do in part with having an inflamed brain. So when you eat vegetables, you feel better mentally and physically. So the lack of light definitely has an impact for sure, but it's the cycles that are really the problem here. Even without the light, we can feel better. And as long as they're cognitive behavioral therapy, we feel quite a bit better. So there's many underlying triggers for this, right? And light can be one of them. But we are totally missing the point if we think that this is just about light, or if we think this is just about brain chemicals. The larger context here is learning how to have good patterns, self-care, that are the fixes for depression, because that's what it is. It's all about those cycles. And it's cycles in the first place that cause the depression. And we need to remember that seasonal affective disorder isn't its own special niche thing. It's a form of depression. And this is another thing researchers are pointing to, that we shouldn't really even need to have a qualifier for this. This doesn't need to be its own thing with its own acronym. This is just depression that happens to be brought on at a certain time of the year by the trigger of less light. And so that may help kick off more negative cycles in our life. But again, the answer treating this, just like the answer to treating depression, is to start more positive cycles and get rid of the negative ones. And we need to have good cycles in all of the major domains of our life. We need to have good physical cycles and spiritual cycles, and not necessarily religious, but spirituality is important for every single human. We need good mental cycles. We need emotional cycles. We need relationship cycles. So it's all about having good patterns and taking care of yourself, stopping the ones that hurt you. So Adding more outer light can help, but if we get rid of the darkness inside us and get rid of the patterns that cause that darkness, it's going to be a much better long-term solution. So, you've got negative cycles, right? I have plenty of them. You can probably think of a few that you have right now. One of the patterns, one of the cycles I'm noticing in my life right now is chronic lower back pain. And my hamstrings are so tight because I sit in this chair for like 15 hours a day, eating a lot of carbohydrates. I keep gaining weight. I don't get it. So weird. But I often sit in the chair and I get tired of sitting this way. And so then I sit cross-legged and my hamstring is in this chronically shortened position. And so it loses its elasticity. And then that pulls on my back muscle because all your muscles are connected. This like constant lower back pain because of this cycle of sitting in this chair constantly. So I'm taking efforts to change that, and I'll get up in between sessions and do some push-ups. And I actually went for a run this week, put on my gaiter and face the cold. Can I get some applause for that? That was a big accomplishment. Thank you.
Nicely done. That is impressive.
Oh, it was rough, real rough today. And today was raking manure out of the truck. So we'll count that as exercise. That's enough, right? So there are the physical patterns in our life. There's spiritual patterns. Some of the spiritual needs we have are to be learning as human beings. We need to grow. It's important for us to be gaining new knowledge, gaining new skills and abilities. Another spiritual need we have is contribution. And if we're not doing enough to help others, if we're just fully living for ourselves, we're going to be a little bit hampered as to like full maximization of our happiness. There's the mental patterns, the mental cycles of having healthy thoughts. Because I don't know about you, but I've had a lot of those through my life, and all my clients have them. We say things like, "Oh my gosh, I hate my stomach. Look at my nose, and look how my eyes are just a little bit off. I'm so ugly. I hate my face. People don't like me. I'm so lazy. I procrastinate all the time, and that means I'm lazy. I should be doing more. I'm not good enough." Are these sounding familiar at all? Yeah, these are universal things everybody struggles with. Wouldn't it be better if we said something different, if we changed those mental cycles to something like, I don't procrastinate. I don't have to be perfect. I just have to finish my tasks. I'm grateful for my body. I accept myself where I am. I like the person I'm becoming. I respect my efforts. Wouldn't that be an amazing thing? What would it be like if we changed to those kind of cycles? Maybe we should say those together. Maybe I'm going to put those in the chat box and we can all unmute ourselves and say them together.
I was going to say, yeah, you need to say those again or put them somewhere because I think we need them.
All right, let's all unmute ourselves and say it together in unity. We're all sitting here alone in our homes, and it'd be nice to feel a little bit of a sense of community, you know? That's the best thing to help fight the darkness in our lives. Just real quick, I was listening to a news show where they were talking about a billionaire who died. He was the former CEO of Zappos, I believe, and he ended up dying in a fire. I think he was worth like $700 million, and he did a lot of like good things. Actually, he helped to revitalize some neighborhoods and build some communities, but he just kind of kept growing increasingly distant, and unfortunately all the people around him were on the payroll and didn't really have his best intentions at heart, probably. And so the point this newscaster was making is he didn't have relationships. You can have all the millions of dollars you want, and it's a sad thing that we see this happen time and time again, that people have enough money to do anything they could ever want to do. They're still miserable. And we find that it's the basics that we all know. It's our relationships that are the greatest source of joy in our life, the greatest source of stress, but also the greatest source of joy. And it would be awesome if we could all be together tonight at the library, even with masks on, but it's nice to see you all digitally. So let's pretend for a minute, let's close our eyes and just kind of imagine we're sitting on those semi-uncomfortable chairs in the American Fork Library.
They are pretty bad. We've discussed that at the library. Those chairs are pretty uncomfortable.
And you can hear the people next to you breathing. You have that kind of sense of the other people there, all in one room together, feeling each other's energy, being united in this purpose to learn together, to make our life better, to change our cycles. Let's just take like a nice deep breath and just luxuriate in the camaraderie. Here we go. It'd be kind of weird if we actually did this in the room, but it's okay. You're all at home. We can do this now. This is nice. All right, let's get to these declarations. Open up your chat box there and unmute yourself and let us join our voices as one. Ready? Here we go. I don't procrastinate.
I don't have to be perfect.
I just have to finish it.
I am grateful for my body. I accept myself where I am. I like the person I am becoming. I respect my efforts.
How does that feel? Who wants to share? What does that feel like? Let's just say those out loud. You may have had a little bit different of an experience than you think I might be expecting. When people say that, I usually notice they kind of sit up a little straighter and they smile, but a lot of times too, it feels really awkward and uncomfortable.
Feels a little bit disingenuous.
Yes, and we feel like we're lying to ourselves. Like, I'm not grateful for my body. I hate my body. It hurts.
Maybe this is where you're going, Kenneth, but something that I just read recently that was really good for me and my self-talk was just to add the word yet to the end of my, I don't do this, or I, whatever, but yet. There's always the, chance for progress if you add that little word, and somehow it changes the whole meaning of the being down on yourself. At least helped me.
It adds an important element of truth, because we might say like, oh my gosh, I hate my body, but we're moving towards things and we are continually evolving beings. And if you could watch your life on super fast forward, you'd see yourself like gain weight, lose weight, gain, lose, gain, lose, gain, lose. Like, we are constant, dynamically in flux people. And whatever's happening now is not permanent. And that mental cycle of thinking that what's happening now is permanent is one of the huge causes of depression, whether it's seasonal or not. We need to remember that we're just here where we are right now, and it's okay. And we can change and we can grow, but we won't get there if we don't accept ourselves. I wish I could just take this knowledge and like pump it straight into your brains, because I can't tell you how important that concept is. If you want to grow, if you want to be different than how you are now, you have to start with accepting yourself how you are now. Because if you don't accept yourself, you send this kind of frustration and rejection energy to yourself.
Will you repeat that?
So, what did I say?
That's one of those really profound things that you just say and then move on from, like it wasn't profound. But in order to,
if you want to change, you have to accept yourself where you are now. And it's backwards. It seems like ironic and just wrong somehow. Like, I don't like how I am. How can I accept myself now? Well, if you don't accept yourself now, then you send the rejection energy to yourself and you get stuck, because your attention can really only be focused on one thing at a time. And so you can look over here at, man, why do I suck? Beating myself up, feeling miserable. And that whole time you're focused on feeling bad, whether you think you deserve punishment, or you think somehow it's going to motivate you more, you're not focusing on, hey, how do I change? How do I get better? And you give yourself such an incredible gift when you accept yourself the way you are.
I think a lot of us have been taught that. I mean, I think it's something that's kind of been ingrained in us that if we don't nitpick, if we don't look for the things that are wrong with us, if we don't, you know, deep dive into self-hatred, then we don't progress because we aren't self-aware. What you're saying is, in order to progress, we have to accept ourselves the way that we are now, because we don't know what the progress is unless we know where we are, right? And then we go, okay, this is where I am, this is where I'm headed, and I can't get there unless I know exactly where I am right now, so I know what needs to be done to change. Is that?
It's kind of like we're running and we hit our mile time and we're like, dang it, that wasn't fast enough. And we start punching our legs. You need to go faster. What's wrong with you? And then we got bruises and contusions and we don't run as fast. And we do that to ourselves. We cause such psychic damage to ourselves. And then we teach our kids that, and then they get damaged. And I can't tell you how many teenagers I've been working with in the last year that have been brainwashed, I guess, with these kind of negative beliefs that I need to beat myself up so I can do better. I need to be so focused. They're so full of anxiety that they just can't function very well. And some of them drop out of school because there's so much pressure to be perfect and do it right, and they don't think it's okay to make mistakes. And unfortunately, that's, I think, the majority of people in the world. We often have parents that teach us this because this is the best they knew how to do. Their parents taught them. And the thing is, you can get some results out of this. Out of sheer willpower, sheer force of mind, you can make yourself do some stuff. And so on paper, it can look like, hey, this worked. This is the way to live. But boy, is it toxic. I grew up believing this too. And I can't tell you how long it held me back. It made me stuck for years and miserable. And when I started to love myself, even with my imperfections, that's when I started to change. Now I've lost my train of thought. What were we talking about before? Declaration. Oh, right. So saying these things can feel like a lie. But we should, I mean, being committed to truth is great, but can we be a little intellectually humble about what the truth is? We all think we know so well, like what's true and what's not. But maybe we actually are awesome. Maybe we can be grateful for our body. Maybe this is just more brainwashing and a false perspective we have. What's happening here is you're saying things that are true. That it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to love yourself where you are. And that's basically, when you say words that are of truth, you're pouring light into your body. And the light goes down inside, and when it finds darkness, they clash, and it brings the darkness to the surface. And it says, that's not true, because they're naturally going to fight. And this is one of the ways you can purge that inner darkness, is just keep saying things that are true so often and with such passionate intensity that the darkness has no place. So you're brainwashing yourself in kind of a good way, actually. And as far as like what's true, I can tell you my full professional opinion behind this. You don't need to worry about that. You get to create your truth. Do you hate yourself or do you love yourself? It's all just an opinion. And so if you're going to tell yourself a bunch of lies that demotivate you, fine, tell yourself lies that make you feel awesome and empowered and love your life. How's that? Who cares? Does it really matter in the end? It makes your life better. So this would be a great cycle to start. This would be a great thing to do. Say these every morning. And if you need to tweak them a little bit, awesome. Find the main negative cycles mentally that you're thinking through. And just go ahead and flip them around to the opposite. I hate my body. I love my body. Maybe that's hard. You know, I had a friend tell me once, Kenneth, why don't you say like, I love my stomach? Like, I don't love this pot belly. It's always sticking out and I've never seen my abs, blah, blah. And she's like, okay, well, how about this? Why don't you say, I appreciate food? And I was like, yeah, I appreciate food. I can say that. And you know what? It started to change me. Started to change me to where now I can still say, I love my body, even with my little belly. It's been getting bigger the last couple months. And I can go into Christmas week. I decided to take it off work, and my wife and I are going to bake all week long, and I'm going to gain weight, and it'll be okay. Then in January, I'll change and I'll go back to calorie deficit. I'm going to love myself, and I'm going to enjoy myself, and I'm going to do it with my eyes open. It's okay to put on some pounds. I mean, remember, we're mammals. We're like, we know about hibernation. We're trying to make it through the cold winters, and our bodies like have been doing this for thousands of years. And so we're like, oh, again, wait, how horrible. Like, no, this is supposed to have a little extra energy. Okay, so it's not a problem. So these declarations, you can say them once, or you could say them 3 times. You can say them like, Kenneth told me to do this and he said it'd work, but I don't really believe him. So I'm just going to do it half-heartedly. And, you know, your efforts will produce results that are about commensurate. But man, if you just lean into this and say, okay, I don't care if this feels fake, I'm just going to do it anyway because I love myself and I'm worth it and I deserve feeling good. I promise you it'll start making some changes. And I'm telling you that from personal experience. When I do my declarations and I really want them to work, I'll go to YouTube and I will go to my inspirational epic music playlist. And so I've got that music going and I'm standing there in my power pose, just like saying these words with passion and intensity. And sometimes I grab my sword off the wall and I hold it up in the air because I feel like a champion. And man, that makes a mental shift. So this is one cycle I would highly recommend.
Get a sword.
A sword. Get a sword. Get the epic music. Say the declaration. Say them with intensity. And this one thing alone can produce some really tremendous results. I had a client once who had severe, like really bad depression. And he also struggled with his weight. He was a couple 100 pounds overweight. And I taught him about declarations and we made some that were very focused on his life. And he was bummed that day, especially as we're talking about all the big negatives in his life. But I said, okay, you're going to drive home. It'll take you 10 minutes. You're going to say these the whole way home. And so he put on one of his favorite instrumental inspiring pieces. And I said, when you get home, you text me. And about 10 minutes later, I get a text that says, I feel amazing. I'm going to go do all this stuff I've been procrastinating. And he had a great day. All because he said some words. Is that pretty simple to do? Is that something you could add to your life that's not going to be too arduous? It's not too bad. Not too bad at all.
Somebody mentioned in the chat, Kenneth, that they like the Power Pose edition. And I was actually reading about that they have done studies on if you like stand in a power pose for a certain amount of time every day, it makes you feel and be more powerful and more proactive. I wish I had the reference for the study. I don't know if you have any study references for that.
Business School, I believe.
I liked it.
But it makes sense because as mammals, we have postures related to other human beings. That's where all of our gestures and expressions are for, is social communication. So if you're around the alpha male of the tribe, well, you're going to try to make yourself look small and like, oh no, I'm not challenging your authority. No, I am weak and subservient. And we kind of compress in when we feel like we're in danger. Our shoulders roll forward and we hunch up. We're trying to protect our vital organs. You know, if we were to get in a fight, right? When we're confident, though, we put out our chest, we pull our shoulders back, we put our chin up, you know? And so that outer movement causes an inner psychological shift. And so you can work from the outside in and the inside out. And if you do both at the same time, super useful.
Coincidentally, something else that rolls our shoulders forward and makes us hunch in on ourselves is having an electronic device in our hands all the time that we're hunched over looking at, which probably has the opposite effect from standing in a power pose because we're all hunched over our devices so much of the time.
Wouldn't doubt it. Yeah, the chat here, Alexandra adds that it lowers cortisol in the body and raises confidence. It definitely helps. I used all these techniques when I interviewed for my first therapy job years ago. And I went in with way more confidence than I would have had otherwise. It works. So it's amazing too, when you start changing cycles in your life, it starts to impact everything else because your life is interconnected. All these domains are locked together. So you can't really change one without changing them all. The tide raises all boats. What's that expression? And the littlest things can make such a difference. For me, I would say like the thing right now, the cycle that has made my November and December so much better so far is charging my phone away from my bed. This one little shift has changed everything because I know that if I get up in the morning and do a cycle of my morning routine, that cycle versus sleeping in cycle, I feel incredible because during that time, I mean, normally I wake up like 5:20, 5:30, and I've got like 2 hours where most of the world's still sleeping, and I'm working on my spiritual side. I'm working on my emotional side and my mental side. I'm learning things. I'm using my journal to track cycles in my life and figure out how I can upgrade it and make it better. And when I do that, I feel conscious. I feel clear. It's like this dark haze that's been around my head starts to dissipate, and I have vision. I can see important things. I realize the importance of goals. Goals used to be like a real four-letter word for me, like any kind of New Year's resolution. I was like, ew, no, gross, responsibility. But now, oh, I am seeing the source code of life. I'm figuring out what the essence of happiness and productivity are. I'm doing things that I never could have done had I not been doing this cycle of my morning routine. So if my phone's next to my bed, I wake up and I hit snooze, or I just start mindlessly scrolling through Facebook, and that lowers your energy right off the bat. And you just, then it's hard to get out of bed anyway, right? But when you start with a low energy activity like that, everything gets more difficult. But because my phone is at the end of my bed, I have to get up. And even though I'm tired, I have my routine. So I just walk into the living room, I sit down, and I start doing my routine. And I'm telling you, I've come out of those dark clouds of mist in more ways than one. I noticed that for months back in September, October, I had been doing more arguing on Facebook. I wasn't being mean and I wouldn't do any personal attacks. And so I could always feel like morally justified when I argued because I wasn't being personal attacky. But I realized I was just kind of like feeling miserable and taking out my aggression on other people, even if it seemed very logical. And as I left that behind and kind of ascended up through the mist, I started to see that this kind of a feeling of enmity, this opposition towards other people, was also directed at myself. And I could not live in this state of judgment for others and love myself at the same time. They're mutually exclusive. And I used to know that deep in my bones, but I forgot it. 2020 has been a little rough on all of us. And I sunk back into the mists where I couldn't see, and this truth was invisible to me. And I had to come back out of the mists and learn that again through my experience. And now, oh man, I get it. And I see how judgment ruins our lives. And I see how comparison is truly the cancer of happiness. So making that one little shift, charging my phone away from my bed, has led to all of these chain reactions. And I've got my ambition back. I lived without ambition in my life for so many years that I thought I wasn't the type of person that had it. I thought that there were people that had ambition and people that didn't. How wrong was I? I learned that everybody has ambition. It's just sometimes we don't have enough positive cycles to help us level up high enough to be able to unlock that. We don't even dare to dream when we're at those lower levels because we don't feel capable of achieving whatever we would dream about. And as we rise up, as we ascend through those levels and create greater and greater patterns, more cycles of positivity, we learn about our identity on a deeper level than we ever thought possible. And we learn things about ourselves that we never would have guessed were there. We start doing things that would have terrified us. and it becomes something that we love and something that we enjoy. And I'm living proof of that because I'm an introvert, and I would just sit by myself for hours if no one ever drugged me out, and I would just play video games and do nothing. But changing these cycles has changed me. So let's start looking at some of the cycles in your life. I want everyone to pull out something to write on. Use your device in front of you, or you can get out some paper. But I want you to start looking for the negative cycles you've got going on in your life right now. Maybe you stay up a little bit too late. And because you stay up too late, you wake up tired, and then you're grumpy. And then your relationships kind of get rubbed off on because you're grumpy. Maybe you've got some cycles of negative self-talk. A little voice speaks all day long. It feels like a part of you. Tells you the things you can't do. It sets limits on you. Maybe there's some cycles of unhealthy eating. My best friend just had some polyps removed from his colon. And he's my age. And he texted me the next day. He's like, my stomach still hurts. I feel like I have a demon inside my intestines. And I'm like, well, what did you have for breakfast? He's like, Cinnamon Toast Crunch. I'm like, okay. Buddy, you're almost 40 years old. Time to start acting like an adult. There's how our cycles, we do them enough, good or bad, can catch up with us. His diet's been crap as long as I've known him. And now he's getting precancerous growths because of it. The little choices we make really tend to add up. So you may want to look at cycles that are happening in your relationships, patterns of fighting, perhaps. Patterns with people, these cycles where you feel some negativity towards them. You don't want to be around them. Maybe you have a grudge. Maybe you're really dreading Christmas because you don't want to have to see your relative. And emotional patterns. And getting stuck in an emotional gear, ruminating on negative things. Feeling like you're a victim. Or the cycles of distraction, where we've got the things that are bothering us emotionally. And we don't want to face them. We don't want to feel them. So we constantly keep ourselves busy. We're always glued to a screen, or we're always super productive. That one, that's a little more camouflaged. A lot of really productive people out there that everyone looks up to and go, how do they do it? Well, they're trying to avoid feeling their feelings. And so, yes, they're accomplishing everything and making everyone else feel inferior. But when it comes from running from things and inadequacies, that can cause some problems. So I hope you've got a couple patterns. Try to find one or two. Or if you're having a hard time identifying these cycles right now, you may just want to look at the things that you don't feel great about. Areas where you think, oh, this could use some work. I'm not sure what's wrong yet, but I know this area could improve. And as you sit down in the coming days with a journal and start kind of just examining it. When I say journal, I'm not talking about recording what you ate for dinner yesterday or who you visited, but a journal, I think the true use of a journal is to track cycles in your life, to say, here's where I'm at, here's what I'm struggling with. What are the contexts in which these are happening? If I know that I always get into a fight with so-and-so, how does that start? And what's the thing that happens before that? And what's the thing that happens before that? And really try to open the scope of your mind a little further than you think. I was working with a client last week, and she was saying how she needed to send the kids to bed. They had to get up for school the next day, and they were watching a show. And she asked them, like, hey guys, how much time is left in the show? And she's like, they totally just blubbly, they're like, Mom, leave us alone, shut up. They were being real jerks to her. And she's like, I didn't do anything. I just asked him when the show was over. And I'm like, well, what happened before that? And she's like, nothing. And her husband pipes up, well, she'd been yelling at the kids all day. I'm like, oh, okay. Sometimes the cause of the problem we're in right now started happening a couple hours or months ago. So really try to look for those types of things too. So does anyone, as you're thinking through these negative cycles, is anyone struggling to figure out some key parts of it that you'd like a little help with here real quick? Anybody willing to be that vulnerable? If you're all figuring it out, fine, no problem, that's great. But if you're like, I don't know, something's happening, I'm not sure, then you can pick my brain a little bit. Okay, so now the thing to look at then is, what positive cycle could I replace this with? Don't aim too high here. You can do something very small. When I am in the depths of sugar addiction and I'm trying to start over, the idea of counting calories just, I can't even handle the thought of it. I know that that's way too high above my pay grade. And so I've learned through tracking my cycle that if I want to start making a change in my diet and exercise plan, I just need to start eating an extra vegetable. That's it. It's pretty simple. I told a client to go home. They're struggling with their weight. And I said, I want you to do 10 push-ups a day and eat one extra vegetable than you normally would. And when I saw him the next month, he's like, I lost 13 pounds. Like, how do you do that? I started doing. I did what you said. Making those little changes helps other changes, and it helps you make bigger changes later. So think about, what would be the small, simple thing you could start?
So I have an example that maybe that you can help with. I feel like I usually am the one that talks, so I tried to wait a little while, but clearly if nobody else is going to, I have issues that I am happy to put out there. So I find that I spend way too much time on my phone because that's what I do to fill time, but that's also what I do to numb and avoid feeling inadequate or anxiety or whatever. And I vacillate pretty wildly between over functioning and under functioning in this capacity. Like I'll have days where I'm like super productive and I'm feeling like on top of the world and I'm getting it all done. And then I'll crash and have like days in a row where I listen to an audiobook and feel like that makes it okay for me to like play games on my phone while I'm listening for an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours or however long my kids are at school. And then just when we were chatting earlier, I was mentioning to you, sometimes when I don't have my phone with me, like there have been times when I've gone, okay, I'm gonna leave my phone on the charger. I'm not gonna keep it in my pocket. I'm not gonna carry it around with me. It seems like pretty much every time I do that, I miss an important call or text or email or something that I would have gotten if I'd had my phone on me. And then I get that little feedback of, see, you really need to have it with you all the time. Because I keep thinking the easy fix is not to have my phone with me all the time, right? Or at least to have like an hour or two a day where I don't have it with me or something, like baby steps. And yet it seems like if I don't, then I missed out. And maybe that's just in my head. But anyway, I don't know how to change that, because my life is also on there. My grocery list is on there and my calendar is on there. And like I use it for my life. So it's not like I can cold turkey not use a phone. Right. I mean, I guess I could, but I feel like that I would be even less productive if that were the case than I am when I have my phone on me.
This is a perfect illustration of a principle that I think is worth talking a lot about. This is a universal human tendency I've noticed. When there's a problem, we like to focus on the behavioral answer. If the kid's being annoying, you tell the kid, stop being annoying, stop yelling. We like to focus on the action. But the thing that drives the action is the underlying emotions and beliefs. Where there's smoke, there's fire. And we tend to focus on the smoke and say, open the windows, get the smoke out. But no, we need to look at the fire and the source of it. But like you said, the real problem here is not that you have a phone, it's that you're trying to use it to numb and distract yourself. And so if I could compress an hour of therapy into a 30-second answer, when you notice yourself feeling the anxiety, that's when you stop, take deep belly breaths, and focus all of your attention on the sensation of the anxiety in your body. Not on
So
the
can I
thoughts
stop
causing
you
it.
right there? Because I think that's where my problem is. I think it's so ingrained in me now that I don't notice, like I don't think about or recognize that I feel anxious until I've been sitting on my phone for an hour scrolling Facebook, or like I said, playing a game while I'm listening to an audiobook. That's my favorite, because then I feel like I'm being kind of productive by listening to a book. But then I can, rationalize doing mindless things on my phone while I'm listening. But I think I don't think I recognize I feel anxiety until I've been in my coping, numbing behaviors for a while, and then I go, oh, how long have I been sitting here, and why am I sitting here?
Right.
And then kind of spiral into that negative. So how do we get to the point where I recognize it before I do it, rather than after I've been doing it for too long?
Hey Google, set a reminder for me every hour. Ask if I'm feeling anxiety.
Okay,
I highly recommend doing these
that
kind
seems
of
pretty
checks.
simple.
And it doesn't have to be every hour. There's a part of my morning routine that I like to call my tranquility check, where I just sit there and I say, am I in a state of perfect tranquility? And if the answer is yes, cool, I move on with my day. But if the answer is no, I want to figure out why. The other morning, this whole week has been pretty good. I woke up early and I'm doing my routine. I feel good and happy about the day. But Wednesday, I felt miserable. Why? Well, because I hopped on the scale and it went the wrong direction. And so I had to spend like about an hour kind of journaling and talking to myself and being like, hey, this is okay. And you're going to have a big week and it's going to be great. Okay, and wait, because you're here temporarily. This is fine. But as I resolved the core issues of, well, you're not making progress, I said, well, actually, here are the ways that I am making progress. I started to feel better. My mood shifted. So having a daily check-in with yourself can be a really great way to start gaining greater awareness of what you're feeling from moment to moment. And you can use the technology to just have alarms that go off at random times so you can check in with yourself. I've got one that goes off at 6:30 on Thursday mornings that says, hey, if somebody tells you a time works for therapy, text them back and say, great, until you've actually put it in the calendar. That's a cycle I am definitely wanting to eradicate from. Makes sense, Wendy?
Yeah, that's a great tip.
So then, when you do notice that you're feeling anxiety, you pause and you breathe deeply. You focus all of your attention on how that feeling makes you feel in your body. You're not thinking about the thoughts that are causing it. You're not going, it's the end of the world, let's focus on the worst case scenario. No, we shut that off. What you want to do is go, what does that do to me? And usually people feel anxiety in their chest or in their stomach. It takes up a certain size, a certain area, and sometimes it's weird shaped. Sometimes it's heavy. Sometimes it feels like a pressure. Whatever it is, sit and stare at it and go, hey, little guy, seems like you're here to tell me I'm feeling anxious. Thanks for being here. Just going to breathe and accept that you're here. You don't fight it. If you reject it, it'll stay forever. But if you accept it, it'll usually start to dissipate. So you just breathe and you accept it and go, okay, clearly you're trying to get my attention. What do you want me to know? It's the end of the world. Okay, I hear you. Thank you. I'll take care of it. You're free to go now. Thanks. Or maybe it says, hey, you know that person? Yeah, you need to call them and apologize. And then you go, you're right. Thank you. You're like, you get the message? Yes, I got the message. Okay, I'm gonna hang around just a little bit longer to make sure you got it. Okay. You accept what you feel. You breathe. Figure out what it's trying to tell you. And if you do that, I mean, if you do that on a daily basis, gee willikers, I'm out of a job. That would be the answer to pretty much every problem humanity is facing. We run from our emotions constantly. We distract when they're there to tell us important things. And sometimes the important thing they're there to tell us is just that we've been trained with some cycles that aren't the best. And it's time to do something different. Anybody else running into any problems with starting a positive cycle, knowing what could be important to replace a negative with? Okay. So you're going to need to add a couple of things. You got your positive plan, new pattern you're going to start. I want you to write down when you're going to do it. Very specific, what days, what time of the day. I want you to write down where you are going to be when you do this thing. And if there are any preliminary things you need to get in order to start this, like, well, I'm going to lift weights every morning, but I don't have any weights. I want you to put it on the calendar right now when you're going to go to the store and buy some weights. And finally, out your calendar, whatever personal assistant you use, and create a reminder, set some kind of an alarm that's going to go off at that time to remind you to start the new thing, because changing habits is not as simple as thinking about them. You'll forget, I promise. So this alarm is going to go off, and that's what's going to remind you, oh, right, yes, I committed to myself, I'm going to do this thing.
Thank you, Kelsey. Kelsey says she has to go, but
Okay,
she
thanks,
really
Kelly.
appreciates. This was really great, she said.
So now I'm going to need everybody to just flip on their video real quick. You don't have to show your face, but I want you to give me a thumbs up. This is your public commitment to the group. I have got my new cycle. I know when I'm going to do it. I know how I'm going to get it done. I have set the reminder. I'm doing this. I need a thumbs up for everybody.
2 for me.
Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, 7, 7, 8. Good job. Okay. Yes. Couple more. Couple more. Don't even have to show yourself. You can just hide in the corner and point it at the ceiling. And just stick that thumb up there. All right. This is your public commitment. Good job. We've all committed to each other as a group, as a little community. We're starting some new cycles. Going to make our lives different and have some new patterns, and things are going to start getting better pretty soon. As long
And we're
as
going to
you
give
got these
ourselves some
reminders.
light and some exercise and some vegetables, because that helps too.
Boy, those 3 things right there, some nice, fairly easy patterns to start. Get a lamp, eat a carrot, do a push-up. The little things start to add up. And that's one of the major keys to success. Let little things accumulate. Don't put pressures on yourself. Be content with doing the small thing. You may think, oh, that's not enough to make a difference. It is. And it's not the end goal either. Because once you get really good at that small thing, you're going to level up to the next thing. You're going to keep tracking your cycles. You're going to figure out what's causing problems in your life, and you're going to figure out what to do differently. And if you don't know, you'll start talking to people and asking them. You're going to search things out on Google. You're going to read books, and you're going to continue to level things up. Happiness is this energy force that you create through constant action. And when you have the habits in place, when you have the cycles in place, they carry you along. They create this momentum that makes it simple. So many of the things that create my happiness are now just cycles in my life that are absolute habits. It's a lifestyle. And sometimes I drop out of the lifestyle. But once you create that, it just carries you forward because you enjoy it so much. It's a lot easier than I think sometimes we make it out to be. But this is where things start. This is where things change tonight. You put your thumbs up and you have committed. Things are going to get better. I'm excited for all the new cycles. And you know what? You should probably email me at some point and just tell me what your cycle is and tell me how it went, because I'd love to hear from you. At KennethRJepsen@gmail.com. I'm gonna put it in the chat box because I would
Yeah, I was
love
gonna say, do you want me to put it in there? But you put it in there, so you're sure you spell it right. That extra E in the middle of your last name, I'm always nervous about. I'm like, does this really go here?
Thank you for coming, everybody. Thanks for
Yes,
spending
thank you
this Thursday
so
with me.
much for coming. Thank you so much, Kenneth, for, I mean, for everything. Next month in January, we're going to talk about what self-care really is and how to do self-care the right way. So that should be a really great one. We're also going to start a marriage class that will be every month. The marriage class for, I can't remember how many sessions we talked about, Kenneth.
I don't remember. We should probably finalize that.
Yeah, we probably should, but we are starting a marriage class. That's going to be a monthly marriage class in addition to or marriage and relationships class, I guess, in addition to our regular AF Aware classes. So next month is self-care. And I think sometimes we think about self-care in self-sabotaging ways. So I think it'll be really good to talk about self-care, especially at the beginning of the year when we're all fired up to do something about it. So we're changing everything right now. And then next month, we're going to figure out how to take care of ourselves better. So thank you so much, Kenneth. Thanks you so much, everybody, for coming. We really appreciate you showing up. I feel like this is super helpful for me, but poor Kenneth shows up every time, even if it is just me. So I'm grateful that you guys all feel like these things are important and needed for you too. Thank you so much for coming, and we'll hopefully see you guys next month, unless anybody has any other questions they want to ask. Anybody before we go? All right, sounds good. We'll see you guys next month.
Cool.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah.